Welcome to 1.5 million new homes, the local government challenge, sponsored by Loft and Mount Anvil and Pitman Tozer Architects. So my name's Toby Fox, and I've been visiting a different council every month to talk about what works and what needs to change in order to get more homes built. And for the last month, we've been in Westminster, posting a number of videos on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on TikTok and other channels all the way through May. So in this session today, we're going to sort of round all of that up and pick up on one of the threads that came out of those videos, focusing on deep community engagement. We're going to dig into that with our guests. And so now it's time to welcome in alphabetical order a magnificent panel for you today. Tom Beardmore, Social Value and Communications Director at Mount Anvil. Tom Conlon, Development Director at Loft. Give us a wave, Tom. James Green, Director of Regeneration and Development Strategy at Westminster City Council. Hi, James. Setareh and Neshati, who is Director of Regeneration and Development Delivery and Operations at Westminster City Council. Hello, Setareh. And Anna Odedun, who is Head of Knowledge at Future of London. Hi, Anna. And Luke Tozer, owner of Pitman Tozer Architects. Welcome, Luke. So before we move on to that kind of deep community engagement issue that we wanted to dig into, let's get a bit up to date with Setareh and James at Westminster. Setareh, James, the week's only just started. What's already at the top of your intray as we head into June?
This morning or June in total? Because it's been pretty busy this morning already, to be honest. We're actively looking at a series of sites to do an early stage assessment in terms of developing a new pipeline in the borough. So I'm actively focused on that currently, and that's what's been keeping me busy for the past couple of hours at least. But obviously it's a broad church what we do. It's not just future sites, it's sites we've got currently moving, and there is all manner of things that keep us active, busy, and the blood level running. So lots going on, and I know we'll cover a lot of that, some of the bigger topical issues in this webinar, but it's very busy, very active, and lots of fun. Sarah, I don't know if you want to fill in on the detail at all.
Of course, in terms of the detail of what we are doing and how we are going about delivering our live program, this morning started for me by joining a session with regards to how to best respond to London Plan consultation, which obviously we got another 3 weeks. Not that we would like to divert from today's focus. That's in the future, and the next 2 years will be busy engaging with that process. But what keeps us thinking at the moment is, once this become reality, how, considering our current target versus the new target, how best boroughs so centrally like Westminster doesn't have access to metropolitan open land, green belt, any golf courses to be given up, how we respond to that new challenge and the new targets to be delivered. So that's how I started my week and my day. And of course, our usual challenges of going forward, preparing 2 of our regeneration schemes for gateway submissions later this year, the design development, everything that needs to happen. So the usual business as always, but I think London Plan and how we go about that is also added to the long list of priorities for us.
Thanks, both. So with things like the London Plan and in fact all of your other work, how easy is it for you to kind of proceed with this work, given that the spending review is going to determine how much money you have to spend on affordable and social homes, which is such a big and important part of what you're doing, and that's while we don't have it yet, it's imminent. So how much are you sort of waiting to hear from government about the spending review, and how much are you able to just carry on regardless?
Yeah, I mean, 11th of June, it's a big day. There's a big target, 1.5 million homes that we all know about, and it's a big moment for the house building industry. The killer question, obviously, is the spending review going to deliver that ambition in terms of the funding boost the industry has been calling for? And that is the killer question, because some of these schemes, as we know, are very expensive to deliver and need as much financial resourcing and support, and more importantly, strategic support. These schemes are long term coming forward, and to have that certainty that budgets, grants are available and can deliver is really, really important. So they're the things that we're going to be looking for from the spending review. Setareh, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Absolutely, specifically in light of the fact that if the new London Plan targets become reality, 88,000, what we perhaps haven't spent enough time to reflect on, apparently, 2/3 of that needs to be social rent or at social discounted level affordable. So at the moment, everybody just dropped the overall number, but the reality which will hit us hard is that 2/3 of that needs to be affordable. How the new initiatives working with GLA in terms of the grant funding and working up a new, we had discussion with GLA last week, how this exemption test to make sure the grant rates can be negotiated differently for boroughs. I know everybody has got challenges to overcome, but how these exemption test will help some boroughs like Westminster, so central, lots of cost even before we get ourselves to the start line with regards to achieving the vacant position, buybacks costs and everything else. So hopefully that spend review will then help the discussion with regards to the new GLA grant funding program and an exemption test that we are very keen to meet the criteria and benefit from it.
Yeah, so this is the 80,000 is the new target for London, 80 plus thousand, isn't it?
88.
New homes per year across the whole city, and it seems a bit odd that you're kind of proceeding, you're trying to respond to the London plan and so on when you don't even know what your target's going to be, and you don't know how those exemptions are going to stack up, and you don't know how much finance is going to be available to deliver the 2/3 of that quota that has to be social. So it does feel like a very kind of uncertain time, at the same time as there's this huge pressure to deliver and get on with it. How difficult is it to respond without those firm targets and without that firm understanding when there's such clarity around the level of ambition? You must deliver, but we don't know quite how much.
So I agree, it is challenging, but then I think therefore we just got to look within our own programme. What we're trying to do as a council, what we're trying to deliver is 50% affordable housing on all schemes that we bring forward. There is an unquenching demand for affordable housing, that is clear, and we will try and do as much as we can. And therefore, I talked about these, six sites we're currently looking at in detail. Very, very early stages. We're not clear if they're going to come forward as sites at the moment. Obviously going to be working very closely across the council, but with our residents and communities with regards to those sites. But this is exactly the sort of time where we want to be having those strategic conversations with MHCLG, with the GLA, to get some degree of certainty that the support will be there and the level of support that will be required if those sites are going to come forward over the forthcoming years. And that's the sort of thing that we want to start hearing, that government are going to be developing those strategic partnerships with local authorities, with house builders that have a track record of delivery and can demonstrate that they're committed, they're ambitious, and they want these schemes to happen. So the money's great. The quantum of homes, the quantum of cash is always, it's a target. Nothing more than that, really. It's about what actually we can deliver at a local level and what support we can get from government to do that, really. So they're the sort of questions that we need answering.
Sure. And also following up from James's all valid points is our delivery models. Obviously, historically, the self-delivery model was the one we were focusing on. Now, over the past couple of years, specifically, we have started to think about what else we can do, how we can benefit from strategic partnerships to make sure we not just benefit from skill set, track record and experience, but also benefit from obviously additional funding available so that the peak time, not all of our scheme can be delivered via a partnership approach, but we can benefit from strategic partnerships Sure. Basically, one of the recent JV joint venture partnership that we entered into last year is the one with Mount Anvil to help us deliver the first phase of Church Street regeneration, and this new strategies to help our funding to go extra mile to the peak point across our program. We have more flexibility. It's going to help. It has helped already, and it will help us in the near future. So we just creative.
So this sounds like a cue for the panel. Let me know if you want to jump in on any of the themes that are starting to emerge. And audience, do feel free to put questions into the chat and the Q&A if you'd like us to raise them. James, what can you say about the sites, the 6 sites? How much can you reveal at this stage?
I'm not sure that's going to, inform this webinar hugely. All I can say really is that, there are heights that are going through the borough. As you will all know, developing in Zone 1, Central London, land is not plentiful, and we have to search, low and high to find. But we've done an extensive search. We've looked at 30, 40 different sites across the borough, and have ended up with a shortlist that we want to spend some time and some money on really getting to grips as to whether they can deliver the type of homes, the ancillary services, improved value in terms of place shaping, community and socioeconomic benefits, and provide great schemes, great design, and great places to live. And that's not something you can do in 5 minutes. That takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of effort, and it takes a design team, a really good quality design team, to help you with that. And that is the bit that we're going to be focusing on over the next 6 months.
Thanks, Toby. I was just going to pick up on some sort of comments around partnership, and I think going back to James's comment about the kind of that unquenching demand for housing, and for me that's the heart of the drive for partnerships, where we've sort of supported local authorities. One of sort of my observations is what partnerships kind of can do, as well as the sort of funding, the alignment of values, and all those good things. Something that doesn't perhaps get explored as much as it might is actually working in partnership goes a long way to upskilling internal teams as well, being able to sort of harness the expertise of developer partners. We're in a place where local authorities, as a rule, haven't developed in the numbers that they did, a generation ago. So we're still a little way behind, I think, across the piece, having a sort of consistent skill set within local authorities to enable the delivery at scale and at pace that's required to get close to the 1.5 million target. So one of the, say, tangential benefits almost, I think, is that harnessing of the expertise, upskilling internal teams, and so that was my sort of initial observation on the benefits of partnership as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That you leave councils in a better state afterwards than before in terms of the experience of the partnership. Tom Beardmore.
Yeah, thanks, Toby. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming in?
Yep.
Yeah, wonderful. It was just on that, that point, the same point on partnerships, really. And Setareh mentioned there, Mount Anvil, we've been in partnership with the Westminster team now for just over a year. And Tom C, you mentioned that alignment of interest, and James talked about accountability on that filming that you carried out previously, Toby. So I guess that resonated with me. It jumped out to me. We think it's specialist work, estate transformation. We think it takes a specialist set of skills, and that alignment of interest piece, I'm absolutely seeing on a day-to-day and a week-to-week, month-to-month basis with the Westminster project team, that we both care deeply about the long-term prosperity of Church Street in our in our specific interest. It's made real. Just the week before last, I was on Church Street. We had a little stall up. We're doing a little bit of some pretty basic code design work, and something that Anna knows lots about. We did some work together and has got some real expertise in this area. But one of the key themes that I've learned from the Future of London's work is you can make this idea of kind of co-design, you can keep it simple and real and without it feeling overly complex. And when I'm having those conversations with residents of Site B or with the community steering group that I'm at, regularly every 6 weeks or so, people care about their place, right? And I've seen the Westminster team, they've meet that need and that deep desire of the people live there. And that's where our alignment of interests are coming together. We've both got that, set the bar pretty highly for best in class estate transformation, right?
Tom, the skeptic might say, you would say that, wouldn't you? But you're a developer. You're in and out in a few years, and you've got a number of other schemes to take care of. So what is it? Why would you get involved to that extent? Why do you care about somewhere like Church Street beyond the sort of 3, 4, 5 years of most development cycles?
Yeah, I guess that's it gets right to the core of who we are as a business, right? We think good development is something that needs to happen across the capital. We think it can be done a little bit differently. And yeah, we're because we are an owner managed business, we can be a bit patient with things. We're not not the whim of needing to run it in and out of schemes quite quickly, and it means we can take quite a long-term approach to the work that we do. So yeah, we'll only focus on a handful of partners at once, Westminster being an incredibly important partner at the moment. There is, we've got £1 million social value and community engagement investment that we're making in the area. That's going to keep, me and the teams busy for 10 years, we think. So way beyond just the 2 years in and out. So yeah, hopefully goes some way to answering some of those skeptics maybe differently.
Well, yeah, you have to be involved for a decade. So you've got to look after people over a period of time like that. Luke.
Thanks, Toby. I was just picking up on what James was saying, really about the and I guess Setareh on some of Westminster's constraints. I've lived in Westminster and run a business in Westminster for over 20 years, and it's blessed with many things that are very special. In terms of facilities and infrastructure, and who wouldn't want to live and work in Westminster? But obviously those constraints mean that you've got to work extremely hard with both the local community and with design, particularly, to try and resolve those constraints of land, money, and carbon to the best possible outcome. So for us as architects, that's where design is the kind of secret sauce and is the thing that can help unlock it. But obviously, as Tom mentioned, that needs the input of the local community if you're going to make somewhere that's a good place for the long term. So as a Westminster resident, I frequently use the commonplace consultation that Westminster have, and I find a very effective way of giving thoughts on developments. It's a good way of giving feedback, and we're also about to start tomorrow on a consultation on a scheme that we've been working on with Westminster for a couple of years, which has just flourished or been planted on Sussex Gardens, which is the tulip cycle ones, where we've planted them and had a launch, and now there's a public consultation. So if you I'll post it in the notes afterwards, but if you have gone to see them or would like to pop down to Sussex Gardens, and then please use Commonplace to give us your thoughts.
Thanks, Luke. So Commonplace is the provider of the platform, the consultation platform. Yeah. Anna, and then we'll go back to Westminster.
Thank you. So for the benefit of the audience who might not know Future of London, we're a not-for-profit members organisation. That gives us a kind of a bird's eye view of what the important topics are for the sector. And just to echo, partnerships is really critical. We hear it from our members the whole time. There's a constant question about how do we make partnerships work? How can we optimise them? We are launching a project later in the year called Regenerative Partnerships, and we'll be asking what more could we do in order to really make partnerships work. So if there's anyone who's interested in that topic and taking part in that, please do get in touch and I can share more detail. And I also just wanted to pick up on Tom Conlon's point around skills and capacity building within public sector organisations. So Future of London again has picked up that this is a real need across the sector. And so recently we've developed something called the Housing Development Academy, HDA. And our goal here is to equip the public sector with those essential skills to develop better affordable homes. The HDA is a training academy essentially, and is something that those in the public sector who do want to upskill can take part in. So I'll just dump a link into the comments if that's helpful for anyone.
That's great, Anna. Thanks very much. Okay, back to Westminster. James, Setareh, I think you wanted to come in on something that you'd heard from the panel. And there's a question also from audience member Paul Burns about void properties and whether or not they're included in the targets that you're being set.
Sure. Thanks, Toby. I will pick up on the first point. I want to go back to the point Tom Beardmore made about the Anvil, the legacy, the association, and how Anvil will go about caring about the community and being very specific about regeneration. I think this was an informed decision and the targeted area for Westminster. Of course, the selection process for this partnership was by the negotiation. We had about 6 to 9 months, third round of negotiations. And as part of that, one of the key criteria was not just the skill set, the commercial aspect, and everything else. One of the key criteria was exactly what the partner offers when it comes to and how they go about genuinely connecting with the community. And within that process, obviously officially and unofficially, we visited a number of the schemes and partnerships that are live, and Anvil have played a role, live delivered a few years later. So to understand the journey, to understand the contributions and alignment, I think alignment in those matters, because the commercials, the legals is always, there's a baseline position to go with and get yourself checked against, but the culture of how we work with the community and that stakeholders base, which I think Westminster base, of course, there's still a lot that we can do better, and we are learning on a literally regular basis, was how this partner will join us and how we evolve the culture to even doing better for the community and making sure there is a legacy rather than us dropping a few new blocks, all looking very good, successful partnership from commercial perspective. And the initiatives that Tom made a reference to is exactly what we are working together to make sure that there is a legacy base for those who are not going to even live in those new flats, those who are living within the area, those Westminster residents who put up literally with all the noise and dust and good few years, maybe over a decade by the time all the phases are built. So that was one point I wanted to make sure that was a very proactive approach by Westminster as part of the selection process. And it is not just what Anvil said. There are provisions within our partnership for those commitments to be monitored and checked. And it's a two-way thing. I think the legacy that we leave together as a partners is a two-way approach here. So that was the point I wanted to add to that. The question about the voids, sorry, what was that question? Can you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, so within the GLA targets, are voids included in that?
Right, that's a question that I don't know the answer. Maybe I need to go back and do a proper review. I don't think it is, but it needs to be checked.
And if anyone in the audience has got any insights into that, do drop it into the chat. Setareh, I'm interested in the way that you talk about the engagement with residents. It feels different from other local authorities, and it feels like Westminster invest more directly in that capacity. Can you give us an idea of the scale of the investment that you have to make as a council in order to build relationships with residents to that level?
Sure. I would say we we take a pride in how we go about engaging with communities. And when we say communities, it is a mix of our residents, the local businesses. It is a wide range. And what came clear to us is, as a result of COVID, it became very clear that we need to reflect. There was a conventional way of engaging with the community. Before the days that co-design and co-creation and co-production became the buzzwords they are now, when we look at some of the steps we took when we started the journey of revisiting the Ebury Estate regeneration, literally about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, some of the images, because I was not involved. But when we looked back, and some of the images it's available to us, or when you look at the community statement, it is very clear that we took those steps not knowing exactly this terminology. Again, we faced the COVID, and everything else happens after that. Something I think we are very proud of is ever learning approach, right? And we are very lucky. We got the team working on Church Street. We always try to seek at how everybody else does it, and if they are doing a good job, how we can adopt it and add it to the way we are going about engagement with the stakeholders, and how if they are not doing a good job, what is it we can learn not to do? It's all about what to do and what not to do, and we have got this in ourselves that we never take it for granted, the way the community engage with us, because it's only take one step wrong and then the community will walk away from any type of engagement. We are very lucky with our team.
Yeah, and I think I'm conscious there's a couple of people want to come in, but I think it's really important to note that, you know, it's a huge investment in terms of people within our team. We've got an entire team that's solely dedicated to community engagement. On our big regen schemes such as Ebury and Church Street, we have on-site offices that are manned constantly. The intervention happens before we intervene, if that makes sense. Yeah. I talk about us looking at new sites. A big part of just looking at a site means listening, speaking with and understanding residents and communities experiences of those work, you know, either living on those sites or in adjacency to them. So they're involved right from the very get-go, really. And what we've learned over time is that's the only way that you're really going to build trust with people. You've got to take them on that journey with you, and you've got to really listen, understand their perspective, and work with them. We talk a lot about co-design and co-production, but ultimately that is about having them on the get-go, from the get-go, and that's really, really important. Tom, I know you want to come in. I'm sure you've got some comments on that.
Before you do, Tom, James, how big is that team? It's like 8 people or something?
9 people. 9 people, but it's not just the quantum, Toby. It's the experiences of those 9 people. They've been doing this for a long time. They're building relationships with the communities for a long time. They're known people within Westminster, well respected, and you know, crucially trusted by our residents, and that's the fundamental point, right?
Absolutely. And Toby, one last point from me is exactly. I think engagement is genuinely, of course, it's a two-way thing, but making sure we enter into their zones at their pace and level of understanding. That's why the upskilling, when we are picking up very difficult topics of the viability and competing priorities, it is very, very important at what point we enter into this conversation and what upskilling we require as a local authority and our internal teams, and what upskilling the community requires, so those engagement and conversations become meaningful as we go about the journey. Some of these conversations take a few years before they become reality. So yeah, I think entering into their zone at their pace and at the same level of understanding is fundamental.
Thanks, Setareh. Yeah, it's very nuanced, isn't it, Tom? Setareh and James have mentioned that part of the Westminster way with engagement is to learn from other places. Do you see this sort of approach elsewhere? Is this common, or are there things that other places could learn from Westminster in your experience?
Yeah, both. I would say, you know, it's I see regularly the intensity that the Westminster team, and I mean that in the best possible way. There is a real intensity to the work that has been going on at Ebury and that is going on at Church Street. And so absolutely things that I have learned on the ground from this project and things that we've brought elsewhere. And I'm sure in years to come, we look back on things together as a team, and we'll take some new things from it as well. Just on your point of investment, Toby, one thing that jumped out to me, and James mentioned the word trust at the very end there. That is the ultimate number one kind of currency from what I've kind of learned. And this idea of, when we want to work with long-term custodians of land like Westminster are at Church Street, we will have teammates at Westminster and also members of the community who have got almost 50 years, in some cases, experience, a head start in understanding their place better than we would ever. So you have to build up that trust pretty quickly. That brilliant quote, years to build, seconds to break trust. And so, I think it's important that we're doing that with actions rather than words. And that's why our program of community engagement has been front loaded. We've tried to get a fast start. We've tried to deliver lots of little quick things, whether they be some work with local group. We've put some security cameras up in the local area. We've been putting on more sessions at the Greenside Community Centre, which is right at the top end of Church Street. We've learned things like people's preferences for kitchens. Not everybody, open plan kitchens aren't for everyone. They're not always culturally appropriate. Even this morning, the first thing on my inbox after my holidays, reading through the Santander cash machine closing down on the corner of Church Street, which will have a huge impact on the livelihoods of the market stall traders there. And so these are all, without having that investment and those boots on the ground that I think is really important, that we as a business think is really important, you can't learn these things and you don't gain the trust of the people that live there. So, pretty critical, I would say.
Yeah, it feels very like you need the synergy between the development partner and the council in order to deliver, to respond to requests and community needs at that kind of really granular level. Anna, we've talked a bit about trust in the conversation so far, and that there is a sort of wider issue here, isn't there, about trust in the UK, in public services, in the government, in the development industry. What's your research telling you about that, and about how we might be able to make use of it, and how we might be able to measure it as something valuable and important?
Yeah, so trust, as identified by the panel, is absolutely critical. I think there was some research by Grosvenor done in 2019 that really brought the issue to life, and I don't think things have changed since. But 2% of communities trust private developers, 7% of communities trust local authorities. And I think those numbers are really stark, and they're really important for us here today to reflect on. There was some to kind of put those numbers in a broader economic context, and I'll come back to the problem of trying to quantify community engagement in a moment, but to just kind of create a sense of how important it is that we tackle trust. Demos recently did some analysis, and they identified that if the UK increased its social trust from its historic rate of around 35% to something that's more like Nordic levels of around 65%, we'd be able to generate 100 billion extra in annual economic growth. And more specifically, low trust is suppressing London's growth by 25 billion annually. So thinking about the political moment, thinking about ambitions of kind of growth and London's growth plan, I think those numbers and how community relations and trust relate to that is really, really important. The point I want to make, though, about shoehorning ROI or economic figures against community engagement, I think this is a really nuanced conversation. Our work over the last 3 years that has been supported by progressive private sector supporters like Mount Anvil, Arup and Pollard Thomas Edwards, is identified that whilst there's this real need for us to make these rational arguments so that more meaningful, more participatory community engagement can be built into budgets and the finances. And James mentioned earlier how important it is for us to properly finance these things. Whilst it's really important to talk in numbers, we also need to be able to communicate the value that meaningful participatory approaches offer beyond just ROI. And that's a really felt experience. And I think probably all of us here today on the panel have been involved in community engagement. We can understand that felt experience of the benefit that it's bringing to communities. But I think as a sector, we need to get better at communicating that to our colleagues so that community engagement, and by that I mean meaningful community engagement, is not just understood to be a nice to have or something fluffy. It's understood to be something really important and something that's a real strategic advantage. And in our work, just final point, in our work to kind of to bring to life that strategic advantage, we came across a case study from Archeo, who are architects, and they did some co-production that they were able to quantify in terms of its benefits, and the trust that they built up with the community did have an impact in that it allowed more units to be delivered. It allowed the process itself to be sped up, and it saved several weeks in planning. So there's this, I'm hesitant about kind of putting those numbers on it, but I think if we are able to articulate the value of trust, then the whole sector will be able to move towards more meaningful community engagement.
That's really interesting, Anna. And this whole idea of trying to measure feelings is really kind of nefarious, isn't it? But clearly important. Tom.
I thought Anna very really quite shocking statistics really about that level of trust in both developers and local government sector, and it's something I think we've been sort of thinking about for a while. So why does that trust fall down? Nobody starts an engagement process in bad faith, do they? Everybody starts with the best of intentions, and somewhere along the way that level of trust kind of can drop off. And I think my reflections on that is we're generally pretty good, I think, about engagement as a sector, engagement around design, but trust disappears when projects don't happen, and why do projects not happen? Well, primarily it's not due to design. They don't happen because the funding disappears or the political kind of spectrum disappears. So there's a lot of, when we go to talk to communities, there's a lot of things in the mix, and actually we're often only talking to them about design and are perhaps not emphasizing enough that there are these other parts to the puzzle. They all need to come together for this development to come forward. So one of the things we've been supporting Cambridge City Council on their Civic Quarter redevelopment, which is a sort of city centre project. Lots of kind of key stakeholder groups, including market traders. Over the last sort of 15 years, there's been a number of iterations of proposals for the market coming forward, and then nothing really happening. And now we've got involved over the last 18 months or so, and this is really sort of take three. So our starting point is one of consultation fatigue almost, that we've heard it all before, it hasn't happened. So this is the struggle, this is I suppose the challenge that we've tried to kind of bridge that trust gap. So a couple of things we've done, one of which we're going to be sharing a business plan, we're going to be sharing the financials around it. People understand development need to stack up if they're going to go forward, but it feels to me it's kind of too rare. Actually, we're treating key stakeholders almost like adults. People do understand it, that it's important that they do see the numbers they need, and if they do, I think there's a greater level of understanding and support really for what for the proposals. And the other area we've tried to do is really be very tight on what we've called a sort of scope of influence. We're currently out to our sort of pre-planning public consultation. We had a first round about a year or so ago, and in that first round we sort of set the parameters. And this round we've just got to be really quite honest and robust with the stakeholders. Not everything is still in the mix. So in terms of our survey, if you like, we've been very kind of clear what is the scope of influence, what's in the mix, what's not, and ensuring that survey kind of reflects that. And that's been really clear in our messaging. And not everybody's going to like that, but I think it's better that you're kind of really upfront and honest about what's in the mix and what's not. So because there's a difference between trust and people liking what you're doing. I think it's okay for people not to like what you're doing at times, but I think retaining that trust is kind of more important than that.
That's really valid, and it plays back to what Setareh was saying about going with communities at their pace. Understanding at what level of understanding they have, and what ability to assimilate that information, and what their experience has been so far. I'm going to come back to you, James and Setareh, in a sec. Luke, I'm interested in this idea of the felt response. I'm wondering, you were talking about your lovely cycle lane dividers made out of colourful flower-shaped recycled materials. Like, are you measuring in your consultation? Are you measuring the kind of emotional impact of those at all?
Yes, I think Westminster we've inputted into the consultation parameters. I think there's even a question as which is your preferred colour, and we'll be able to assess what of the 10 colours, which of them is unanimous, or which of them is preferred by the most. But I think coming back on some of Tom's comments and Anna's as well, we almost every project that we do takes a long time, and there is, as Tom mentioned, that sort of consultation fatigue, and it's I think an inherent conflict between the pace of development and the sort of political and economic things change much more quickly than it's possible to deliver a scheme, which often takes somewhere between 4 and 15 years, depending on its scale. So I think having key people within the community that really help own the project and who feel invested in it over that length of time is incredibly important and incredibly difficult to do. But when it feels like a joint project for the development team and obviously including the architectural team, but the wider community, I think everyone, if they're treated, as Tom says, like adults, realizes there'll be bumps along the road and the journey, and actually if people are properly treated through that and brought along the journey, then they will be there helping overcome some of those hurdles. Obviously they can't necessarily do something about a wider political environment or a massive change in funding, but I think we have been to events on schemes where we've had 11 consultation with the local community, and because one person at one community consultation said he or she thought the building was too high, there were 8 family homes removed, 1 floor was taken off the building. And I think those sorts of decisions, poor decisions like that, are as a result of that sort of lack of trust that was evident within the local authority, not Westminster, but elsewhere in London, where there wasn't a shared sort of purpose. I guess the real success of community consultation done well is where that everyone feels like they're winning out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. James, Setareh, are there any threads in that you'd like to pick out? And I'm interested in particular in your understanding of how to measure the kind of the trust value of what you're doing, and how important that is to the administration at the moment.
Trust, well, it sounds cliches, but it's everything. But how do you build that trust? That's the key. And how do you do it consistently over time? Because at the end of the day, these big regen schemes, you're intervening in people's lives. That's significant for the residents and the communities of Westminster. So if you're going to do that, you've got to have a plan for the long term, and how you work with them is got to be completely transparent and consistent. We talk about viability, financial issues. There is a whole range of issues that we experience on these big schemes week in, week out. And they're often complex, difficult to understand, and don't always make a lot of sense, that be it political, financial, whatever it might be, design problems, building safety. I haven't even talked about that yet. But how you communicate that, and how you continue for people to trust you despite all of these issues. It's an art and a science, frankly, and you've got to build that relationship. And it's not just a superficial relationship, it's got to be a deep and meaningful relationship, frankly, for people to continue with you and trust you. Is really, really complex, and that takes huge investment, time investment, and also how do you create the touch points for people to express their disappointment, their frustration, their joy. It's the whole range of emotions throughout that consultation period. You've got to have a systematic and structured framework in place, to work with those residents to get to a successful conclusion. And that goes from, we talked about boots on the ground, door knocking, the hard yards in the early stages, through to creating community forums that sit on project boards, that have a voice, and hear and listen and input throughout that process, from the early stages right to when the keys hand over. So it's a long-term investment. It's something that can't be taken lightly, but it's so important, because, as I said, you could be intervening. People have built their lives. You could be intervening, in 5-10 years. People, grow up. Their priorities change. Life goes on, doesn't it? And meanwhile, you're on their estate building houses, and creating, dust and noise. So that's about sort of unpacking it all, I suppose. But if you can enter into something like this, with your eyes open and a plan in place, then I think you have every chance of success.
And not even that, maybe involving them in the whole process of procuring partners, design teams, and whatever they can represent from community. I think this is something we started over 2 years ago. So whenever we have got big appointments happening when it comes to multidisciplinary design teams or partners, we involve them as part of the procurement process. We get them to be official evaluators of the tenders submitted, sometimes a specific question directly related to the community, sometimes the entire tender. And the discussion we have and the scoring, the moderation panel when it comes to us scoring, in one of our recent examples earlier this year, the representative from community were just so impressed and surprised with the level of diligence we apply when it comes to scoring one engineer over another, one question, one point higher or lower. They participated themselves. They listened to the officers who were evaluating and moderating, and they at the end of that session, they express how impressed they are, that how much diligence it goes, that we select on their behalf of, obviously, all these experts joining us and helping the council to start a journey of designing, co-designing, delivering a scheme, which has proved so helpful and contributes directly to that trust point.
Well, I'd love to dig in more with this panel on that idea of procurement with local residents involved. I'd love to find out what Anna wants to add, but we've got to end the session. We're 5 minutes over, I'm afraid. So I'm gonna call it to a close now by thanking our viewers for joining us, and also just to note that we made it to, I think it was 46 minutes before anybody mentioned the Building Safety Act or the Building Safety Regulator. So well done, panel, for avoiding that one. I can't believe we had a conversation about what's in your intray without mentioning that until then. But audience, please join me in thanking our fantastic panel. Thank you to James Green and Setareh and Neshati from Westminster City Council. Round of virtual applause. Thank you, Anna Odedun from the Future of London. Thank you also to Tom Beardmore of Mount Anvil and Tom Conlon from Loft, and Luke Tozer from Pitman, Tozer Architects, both for your contribution to the conversation today and also for your sponsorship, which has made the webinar and the whole Westminster season possible. And thank you, audience, for sticking with us during your lunch hour. We're going to be back on the 24th of June, Tuesday, the 24th of June, with the London Borough of Camden. So watch out for our video interviews from Camden, which we start publishing this week. But in the meantime, thanks again to everyone from Westminster City Council, from Loft, from Mount Anvil, and from Pitman Tozer Architects for your contribution to 1.5 million new homes. Thank you very much.